কাছে কিংবা দূরে যে যেখানে আছেন আপনাদের সবাইকে স্বাগত জানাচ্ছি। আমি সুলতানা রহমান, দেখছেন বাংলা নিউজ নেটওয়ার্ক। আপনারা জানেন যে আমেরিকা বাংলাদেশের সঙ্গে একটি ট্রেড ডিল করেছে, একটা বাণিজ্য চুক্তি করেছে। সেই চুক্তির বিষয়ে প্রেসিডেন্ট ডোনাল্ড ট্রাম্প একটা চিঠি পাঠিয়েছেন। বর্তমানে বাংলাদেশে নবনির্বাচিত প্রধানমন্ত্রী তারেক রহমানকে অভিনন্দন জানিয়ে সেই চিঠিতে তিনি মূলত ওই বাণিজ্য চুক্তির কথাই উল্লেখ করেছেন। সেই চুক্তিতে কি আছে আমরা কিন্তু কেউ জানি না। যেই চুক্তিটি সাবেক প্রধান উপদেষ্টা ডক্টর মোহাম্মদ ইউনূসের সঙ্গে সংঘটিত হয়েছিল, এবং এই চুক্তির ভেতরে এটা একটা নন ডিসক্লোজার এগ্রিমেন্ট, মানে যেই চুক্তি প্রকাশ করা যাবে না এরকম একটি। ফলে এই বিষয়টি নিয়ে আমি কথা বলবো, এবং প্রেসিডেন্ট ডোনাল্ড ট্রাম্প তিনি যে প্রধানমন্ত্রী তারেক রহমানকে অভিনন্দন জানিয়েছেন, সেই অভিনন্দন বার্তাটি আসলে কি, এটির অন্তর্নিহিত কি বিষয় রয়েছে, এটি নিয়েও কথা বলবো। এবং আমি আজকে আমার অতিথি হিসেবে আজকে যুক্ত করছি এমন একজনকে, তাকে আমি আগেও একদিন আমার আমার অনুষ্ঠানে যুক্ত করেছিলাম। আমি তার সঙ্গে আপনাকে পরিচয় করিয়ে দিতে চাই আপনাদেরকে। এবং সেই আপনারা জানেন যে তিনি মাইকেল রুবিন। আমি এর আগেও একদিন এনেছি। বিভিন্ন সময়ে বাংলাদেশ ইস্যুতে তার কমেন্টগুলি কিন্তু আমরা শুনছি। তিনি মধ্যপ্রাচ্য, ভারতবর্ষ, চায়না এই রিজিয়নগুলোতে তিনি গবেষণা করেন। তিনি এক্সপার্ট, বিশেষজ্ঞ এখানকার যেই আমেরিকার ফরেন পলিসি, এখানকার জিওপলিটিক্স, এইসব বিষয়ে তিনি খুবই অভিজ্ঞ, তিনি এক্সপার্ট। এর বাইরে তিনি আগে পেন্টাগনে তিনি একজন অ্যাডভাইজার হিসেবে কাজ করতেন। বর্তমানে তিনি একজন ফেলো হিসেবে কাজ করছেন ফরেন অ্যান্ড ডিফেন্স পলিসি ইস্যুতে। আমি মাইকেল রুবিনকে স্বাগত জানাতে চাই। Good evening, Mr. Michael Rubin.
Thank you for having me, Sultana.
It's always great to have you on my show, and I thank you so much for joining on my show. First of all, I want to know, did you see the President Donald Trump? He wrote a letter to Prime Minister, newly elected Prime Minister Tariq Rahman. I think you read it, right?
I did read it. It was a very interesting letter. Put it this way. Usually we have a lot of rhetoric after someone has come out on top in an election, just congratulating them. It's boilerplate. The fact that the President of the United States wrote a separate letter, however, really shows that something else is going on. And when I read that letter, what really stuck out was the President's reference to defense agreements, defense sales. So what I read into this letter is that Donald Trump, on one hand, is congratulating the new prime minister, but on the other hand, not only the White House, but the entirety of the U.S. national security bureaucracy, the State Department, the Pentagon, the CIA, the National Security Council, is very much interested on what happens with China in Bangladesh and wants to pivot Bangladesh away from its reliance on Chinese weaponry.
Right. Actually, I am showing you the letter. Here, if you read it, many Bangladeshi expert or journalists, they explain it as a threat. Do you think so?
I don't think it's a threat, but look, the United States isn't indifferent to Bangladesh. It's an incredibly important country, which is why there had been a good deal of interest about Bangladesh ahead of this election, because people didn't necessarily, I mean, the Clinton administration trusted, but many people didn't trust Muhammad Yunus and his embrace of terrorists and war criminals. The fact that the election, while not completely legitimate without the Awami League, still was a repudiation of the Jamaati Islami. On one hand, there's a sigh of relief in the United States. On the other hand, we recognize how important Bangladesh is just by nature of this crisis having come to the fore. But there's a long-standing issue and concern, growing concern in the United States about China's so-called string of pearls strategy in building ports or facilities in ports across the Indian Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, the African littoral coast, and so forth. And so with the Chinese having built a port facility in Chittagong, that raises concerns in Washington the same way that similar port facilities in Sri Lanka or the Gwalior port in Pakistan do.
Hmm. The facility built by former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, it is for only for Bangladesh, not for China.
Well, the concern within the United States with a lot of these ports is that they are dual use. So, on one hand, while they appear to be strictly for the case of Chittagong commercial ports, if they're built to specifications that could service Chinese warships, that raises a concern because it's less to do with Bangladesh and more to do, number one, with America's distrust of China, and number two, after what we saw in Sri Lanka, with China leveraging through debt diplomacy control over a major Sri Lankan port, there's concern that China might try to replay this elsewhere. China already has also done this in Djibouti, for example, and we have increasing problems in Tanzania and in Kenya. So there's concern. But also from Bangladesh's standpoint, they purchase weaponry from all over. A lot of it is from China, but they've also been reaching out to Russia, to Turkey, and other countries. And like India, what Bangladesh is trying to do is not put all their eggs in one basket. Perhaps what Donald Trump is saying is that's fine, but include American eggs in that basket, and you're still a bit top heavy when it comes to China. Look, Bangladesh, it's just a fact of life, is caught in between major world or regional powers, and it's got to understand not that anyone is threatening them, but certainly these powers are going to have concerns and lobby Dhaka to do the right thing.
Yeah, I got you. But do you think that the same concern belong with India too?
Yeah, absolutely. The United States has a concern with regard to India, but with regard to India, of course, the concern has a lot less to do with China and more to do with Russia. That said, look, Bangladesh isn't the only country in this situation. Take a country like Greece. The United States, which of course is allied with Greece, Greece is a NATO partner, is still concerned about Chinese investment in the port of Piraeus, which of course is the port for the capital city of Athens. And so Bangladesh isn't being singled out as being threatened. But if I were a Bangladeshi official, what I would understand from this isn't that Donald Trump wrote this letter talking about trying to reach a defense agreement with Bangladesh. It's that the fact that this made it into a presidential letter, that there were meetings in which Secretary of State Marco Rubio or the head of the CIA or the head of the Pentagon pulled Donald Trump aside and said, this is an opportunity. You need to push this message. This wasn't something that Donald Trump came up with on his own. What Bangladeshi officials need to understand is that this push, in order to extricate Bangladesh from dependence on China for its defense and its weaponry, is something which is percolating up and is going to outlive Donald Trump. Look, Bangladesh gets armored personnel carriers from China. It gets tanks, both the MBT 2000 and the VT5. It gets submarines from China. It gets fighter jets from China. This is starting to become noticed, and it's starting to become a problem.
Yeah, I agree with you, but American weapons are expensive. Bangladesh cannot afford it.
No, you're absolutely right then. But then that becomes something which needs to be discussed in negotiations. We've seen similar negotiations with regard to Ukraine, with regard to Cyprus, with regard to several East European states. The fact of the matter is, on one hand, it's not clear that Bangladesh is purchasing the right weaponry. And why does it necessarily need submarines when the biggest concern which Bangladesh should have are Chinese fishing boats, which are infringing on Bangladesh's sovereign waters? The fact of the matter is, perhaps Bangladesh could be purchasing corvettes and these small, fast Coast Guard ships from the United States or from other suppliers. That's the type of discussion we need to have. It's not as if Bangladesh is going to be purchasing an F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, because Bangladesh doesn't need it.
no, 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 no. But I mean, many Bangladeshi people think it's a threat, not in terms of that America is going to attack them, but Bangladesh is bound to do that. Otherwise, the kind of regime change or newly elected government, they may not sustain something like that.
Well, let me put it this way. I don't think the United States is threatening Bangladesh in that way. The purpose of diplomacy is simply to make each country's concerns known. That's what Donald Trump is doing. That said, what Bangladesh needs to worry about isn't regime change coming from abroad, but the fact that election or no election, and Prime Minister Rahman, isn't going to have full legitimacy if he tries to ban and if he continues to ban the main opposition group. Muhammad Yunus was motivated by ego and he was motivated by hate. And because of that, he eviscerated any democratic legitimacy which this election had. What Prime Minister Rahman needs to do is end this cycle, which we've seen honestly from both the BNP and the Awami League before, of banning each other and recognizing that Bangladesh is strongest when you have rule of law and when you have an active opposition, which isn't Jamaati Islami, because Jamaati Islami shouldn't be empowered in that way.
Right, you told that. I have a question in that regard. That your projection was that Jamaat is going to win. So what was the reason that it failed?
Okay, look, I'm pleasantly surprised. I mean, it wasn't only my concern, but as a defense analyst, I'm used to considering the worst possible outcome. And I'd rather be pleasantly surprised, as I am in Bangladesh right now, rather than caught by surprise if something really bad happens. So I'm pleased that even a younger generation of Bangladeshis understand the fraud that Jamaati Islami represents, understand that they are war criminals, understand that they want to transform a great nation like Bangladesh back into East Pakistan. The fact that young Bangladeshis turned their back on Muhammad Yunus's plot and Jamaati Islami is something which I'm thrilled about. That said, the fact is Jamaati Islami is still much more powerful than perhaps democratic legitimacy would have, because by banning the Awami League, it allowed Jamaati Islami into the position of being the major opposition party. It shouldn't be a major opposition party. It should be an asterisk in the political spectrum of Bangladesh. But again, arguably the most popular party wasn't allowed to run. And if any BNP activists among your audience say, well, no, the BNP is the most popular party, the Awami League isn't, fine. Then prove it at the ballot box.
Right. The thing is, last 16, 17 years, many times America raised their flags that there was no election or major political party, BNP, didn't participate that election, so that they always raised the flag. Now, as Awami League didn't participate the election and they were banned from the election, so do you think America will consider a position from that perspective?
Look, I hope they do. Although, quite honestly, right now, the Trump administration isn't known for promoting democracy as among its top agenda items. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, I think, understands this more, but too often the South Asia Bureau at the State Department operates on its own without adult supervision. And of course, we saw this with the political officer who was seeking to reach out to Jamaati Islami in a rather inappropriate sort of way. That said, what Donald Trump is most interested in is trade. And so we also saw him, as we were talking offline, Sultana, saw that the U.S. Embassy has posted a note bragging about how thrilled the United States is not only with the trade agreement with Bangladesh, but also with other countries, Cambodia, Taiwan, Indonesia, Argentina. And this is an opportunity for Bangladesh to really show Donald Trump that it wants to partner with the United States. Now, of course, when I say Bangladesh should partner with the United States, Bangladesh has to do what's in Bangladesh's interest first and foremost. However, I would hope that Bangladesh would ultimately conclude that working in conjunction with democracies like the United States and India is a far better strategy for Bangladesh than tying their lot to a country like China.
Okay, China is our neighboring country. We have, our Podda Bridge is built by Chinese company. Chinese government helped it. We have lots of mega project in Bangladesh built by China. So we have a strong tie. I mean, Bangladesh has a strong tie with China. So what do you think, the if you see the Chinese perspective, how they're gonna take it?
Okay, the question that I would ask, and this is a question which I ask when I go to countries like Ethiopia or Tanzania or Kenya or other countries as I travel around Africa often or the Middle East, is what is China's motivation? Is China acting altruistically, or are they trying to use debt in order to gain political and diplomatic leverage? Some countries in Africa, Ethiopia has done this recently, have recognized that they can't fully trust China. And so what they do is they still accept some of the aid and investment from China, but they ensure that they balance it with the European Union. The same thing is true in a country like Rwanda, where they've actively put aside some of the Chinese construction firms and instead brought in Qatari investment or Turkish construction firms simply because they want balance. My advice to Bangladesh isn't to turn their back on China. That's not my job to tell them. But it's rather, in order to preserve Bangladeshi independence, you need to balance Chinese influence with other influence. Look, Bangladesh just had a crisis over its sovereignty when Pakistan and the ISI tried to use these fake protests to have a coup and empower Jamaat Islami. Their plot didn't work. If it did work, Bangladesh would have its sovereignty eroded because a lot of the shots would be called from Islamabad. Now that that crisis is past, Bangladesh needs to understand that it shouldn't put all of its eggs in the Chinese basket. And frankly, I would say the same thing, that Bangladesh shouldn't fully trust the United States either. Bangladesh needs to assure its own sovereignty and independence from other parties which might want to infringe on that.
I understand your point, but if you see from Bangladeshi perspective, it's a trade, right? They're gonna check which one is affordable for them, right? But here, do you think USA is pressurizing them to have their product? Even it's not only a defense weapon; it's agricultural thing. Bangladesh is Bangladesh economy depends on agriculture, right? They have some deal with that too.
Look, understandably, Bangladesh, its economy depends on agriculture, but of course, the United States is also very much interested in the textile trade. That's where a lot of the US Bangladesh trade comes. And therefore, there's enough opportunity for both. But when Bangladeshis might say China can provide certain things for cheaper, the question number one is whether there are any strings attached to what China is providing. And of course, we've seen in other countries around the world, especially in Africa, in South Asia, in Sri Lanka, we saw this in a major way with regard to China pointing out some of the fine print in its contracts in order to truly erode sovereignty. That's all we're saying we need to be careful with in Bangladesh. And of course, the United States has concerns about what China might be doing in Chittagong. What I would suggest the new government in Bangladesh does is engage with the United States. Transparency is in everyone's interest, just to make sure that the container facility in Chittagong remains, even if it's Chinese operated, remains something that doesn't come to threaten Bangladeshi sovereignty.
Wow. Now, if they cannot maintain the deal, if Bangladesh fail to maintain the deal, the agreement they have already with America, and people of Bangladesh doesn't know what are those agreements. So if they fail, what could be the consequences?
Look, I mean, a failed deal breeds conspiracy and recrimination on both parties. All I can say is that I am happy that Bangladesh is clearly on the agenda of the US government at various levels right now. Again, Sultana, it's not normal for the President of the United States to write a letter. I didn't see it as a threatening letter. I saw it as a letter saying this is an agenda point which we want to discuss. On top of which, of course, we're not just talking about sticks, we're also talking about carrots. We saw that with the trade deal. And so the fact of the matter is, if I were on the new prime minister or his aide sitting in Dhaka, I would basically say the United States is paying attention to us. What do we want from the United States? How can we grow this partnership? We don't need to wait until something fails in order to engage. Clearly, I mean, I'm thrilled to see so much interest in Washington, at least among the power circles that matter, about Bangladesh.
Yeah. What? What is the major factor? Only China is the major thing here, Bangladesh is a poor country, a small country. It is not comparable with America, right? I understand that, but people from Bangladesh, they are really worried what is going to happen. Could you please only, if they agree the trade deal, if they implement, that is the only solution for them. There is no
Well,
other choice.
let me put it this way. First of all, I'm going to push back on you a little bit, Sultana. You say Bangladesh is a poor country, but we saw, I mean, quite frankly, up until Sheikh Hasina's ouster, that its economy has been one of the best performing economies in terms of growth in the world. Bangladesh needs to get out of this mindset that it's just a poor country. It's a major country, and it's got an increasingly important economy. What I would actually say is, I mean, Bangladesh needs to, I'm always a big fan of liberalized trade, but the most important thing with regard to Bangladeshi security isn't simply the United States-China competition. It's ensuring that Bangladesh and India have a close partnership. There's no reason why they shouldn't. Both countries have more to gain by cooperating, especially given their borders and the accidents of geography, the Seven Sisters, and so forth. It's important, and that, I think, is where we're also going to see U.S. diplomacy come into play, because we want to see a strong, secure, democratic India at peace with itself and its neighbors. And we want to see Bangladesh regrow its economy from the retraction that we saw under Muhammad Yunus. We want to see it not become a tool for Pakistan or China. We want to see it as a country which contributes to the region. Sorry, last point, and I know I'm talking too long, Sultana, but I mean, a while ago, I was in a conference and we were talking about various regional groupings. And one of the things to understand with regard to South Asia, it has one of the lowest rates of regional integration on earth. The trade from Pakistan to India, India to Bangladesh, and so forth. You compare that with East Europe, with West Europe, with Central Africa, with Southern Africa, with Latin America, with East Asia. The fact of the matter is, South Asia is falling behind on this integration. And given the population in Bangladesh, India, and so forth, it's in the interest of both countries' economy to increase the trade and the interactions with each other.
Yeah, I got you. Do you think that mentioned that Bangladesh was really, we call it roaring tiger in terms of economy? Their GDP was 7.2. So it was almost highest in the world. So uh, Sheikh Hasina is no more in as a prime minister. Economy is no more that vibrating. Now GDP is 3.2% currently. So I don't know. America is considering that. And do you think the Sheikh Hasina was ousted because of this?
Well, let me put it this way, and you know by training I'm a historian. Revolutions happen not when the economy retracts, but when it grows very, very quickly. That's what happened with the Shah of Iran. Iran wasn't in recession when the Islamic Revolution happened. It was the social dislocation in which some people grew wealthier at a faster rate, industrialized and so forth, and other people felt left behind. Perhaps we had some degree of that happening in Bangladesh, but the fact of the matter is, under Sheikh Hasina, it wasn't so much that you had an organic protest movement. You had people in West Pakistan. You had the ISI, which was purposely trying to provoke and sponsor some of these demonstrations in order to knock Bangladesh down. Because, look, it's embarrassing to be a Pakistani. And the reason it's embarrassing to be a Pakistani is because Pakistan had the same opportunities as India upon partition and failed. I mean, Pakistan is basically teetering on state failure. India's what, the third or the fourth most important economy in the world. Then let's put India aside. You have East Pakistan separate from West Pakistan. And Bangladesh is performing much better than Pakistan did, at least under Sheikh Hasina. And so when you're in a situation like that, Pakistani leaders in the ISI had two choices. They could either address their own corruption and put Pakistan back on track, or they could try to ruin what everyone else has been doing. And unfortunately, given the ingrained interests which Pakistani leaders in the ISI have, it's much easier to try to break India or Bangladesh down than it is to actually repair Pakistan. And so what I see is Bangladesh suffered from Pakistan's failures and its own lack of self-confidence and its own ability to take responsibility for itself. It wanted to ruin Bangladesh because it wanted to not have to deal with the comparison of Bangladesh being that roaring tiger.
Yeah. You know, Bangladesh right now, the way it is doing, only 7 days, this prime minister, what do you expect from this new prime minister?
Look, I mean, what I hope for and what I expect are two different things. I would hope that the new prime minister would understand how undemocratic Muhammad Yunus was and what a security risk releasing so many of these terrorists and extremists from prison presented. I would hope that the new prime minister would embrace some of the religious minorities who were targeted by Muhammad Yunus's hateful regime. Unfortunately, I'm not sure whether Prime Minister Rahman has it in him to do this, but he should. I also think that Rahman could be extremely popular if he legalized and unbanned the Awami League so that they could start to rebuild. If he showed that he was a Democrat and he wasn't just working on his own animosities the way that Muhammad Yunus was.
Do you think he will unban Awami League?
I don't think he will. I think he should. This is where I think we need to have international pressure to encourage him to do the right thing.
Do you think America will do that?
Maybe not under Trump, but under if Marco Rubio comes out on top, I think it's a real possibility.
In next month, in March, Secretary of Security Paul Kapoor is visiting Bangladesh. I'm sure you know that. What is the purpose? What can be? I mean, what is the value of his visit?
Look, any high-level visit, I think, is quite important. But let me put it this way, and I'm saying this because it's my way of telling you that my battery is almost dead. This is probably something we should discuss next month if we do this conversation a little bit more regularly, so that we can look at his agenda in depth.
Okay. Thank you so much, Michael Rubin. Thank you so much for joining me. I wish you all the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sultana.
Thank you. আমরা এতক্ষণ কথা বলছিলাম পেন্টাগনের সাবেক অ্যাডভাইজার, মানে পরামর্শক, এবং তিনি ডিফেন্স এবং ফরেন পলিসির বিশেষজ্ঞ, ডিফেন্স সামরিক বিশেষজ্ঞ আপনি তাকে বলতে পারেন। তিনি বলছিলেন যে বাংলাদেশের সঙ্গে আমেরিকার যে বাণিজ্য চুক্তিটি হয়েছে, এর পুরোটাই আসলে বাংলাদেশ ভৌগোলিকভাবে যে অবস্থানে রয়েছে এটি একটি বড় কারণ। আ বাংলাদেশের সঙ্গে চায়নার যে সম্পর্ক যতভাবে তারা বাংলাদেশ চায়নার আ ডেভেলপমেন্ট রয়েছে, বাণিজ্য রয়েছে, এগুলো আমেরিকা আর ভালো চোখে দেখছে না। আ না দেখার কারণে তারা চায় এই ডিলগুলো, এই বাণিজ্যগুলো বাংলাদেশ আমেরিকার সঙ্গে করুক। আপনারা জানেন যে আ আম আমেরিকার যেই ডিফেন্স স্ট্র্যাটেজি যেটি সবশেষ সম্ভবত ২০১৮ সালে প্রকাশিত হয়েছিল, সেখানে তারা তাদের ১ নম্বর শত্রু রাষ্ট্র হিসেবে চিহ্নিত করেছিল চায়নাকে। আগে থেকে যেমন আমরা জানি চায়না, রাশিয়া একটা প্রতিদ্বন্দ্বিতামূলক, শত্রুতামূলক রাষ্ট্র। কিন্তু আমেরিকা সেই ২০১৮ সালে সেখান থেকে সরে আসে। সেখান থেকে চায়না তাদের ১ নম্বর প্রতিদ্বন্দ্বী বা শত্রু দেশ। কিন্তু বাংলাদেশের সঙ্গে চায়নার যে গভীর সম্পর্ক আ সেটিকে তারা ভালোভাবে দেখছে না। উম আমাদের গভীর সমুদ্র বন্দর যেটি হচ্ছে সেটি চায়না বানাচ্ছে। আ আম আ মোংলায় যে বন্দর হচ্ছে সেটি চায়না বানাচ্ছে। এরকম বাংলাদেশে যতগুলো উন্নয়নমূলক কর্মকাণ্ড রয়েছে বিশেষ করে সামরিক ক্ষেত্রে এই কাজগুলোকে অ্যা মা আমেরিকা মনে করছে তাদের জন্য খুবই উদ্বেগজনক। ফলে আমেরিকা তাদের প্রভাব ওখানে বিস্তার করতে চায় এবং তিনি খুব মাইকেল রুবিন খুব স্পষ্ট করেই বললেন, এর বাইরে আসলে বাংলাদেশ এতই ছোট একটি দেশ, এটি আসলে আমেরিকার কাছে কোনো গণনাতেই আসার কথা নয়। কিন্তু তারপরেও আ এটি জিওগ্রাফিক্যাল মানে ভৌগোলিক কারণ, বাণিজ্যিক কারণ, অনেকগুলো কারণের মানে সমন্বয়ের ফলে বাংলাদেশ একটি গুরুত্বপূর্ণ রাষ্ট্র হয়ে উঠেছে। ফলে বর্তমানে যে প্রধানমন্ত্রী তারেক রহমান তাকে সিদ্ধান্ত নিতে হবে তিনি আমেরিকার সঙ্গে সম্পর্কটি কিভাবে উন্নয়ন করবেন। চায়নার সঙ্গে যদি সম্পর্কটি তিনি অব্যাহত রাখেন সেগুলোর একটা তো পরিণতি ভোগ করতেই হবে। কি সেটা আমরা জানি না। কিন্তু খুব স্পষ্ট করেই মাইকেল রুবিন এই কথাগুলো বললেন। আমি যতটুকু সম্ভব হলো আপনাদেরকে বললাম বাংলায় বুঝিয়ে। এর বাইরে তিনি বলেছেন যে শেখ হাসিনার সরকার এত উন্নয়ন করেছিল যে বাংলাদেশকে আর গরিব বলা যায় না। আ বাংলাদেশের যেই অর্থনীতি যেভাবে করে সারা পৃথিবীর মধ্যেই এটি একটা অন্যতম বড় অর্থনীতি। মানে অ্যান আ আ কত বড় অর্থনীতি এটার হিসেবে না, যেভাবে করে অগ্রসর হচ্ছিল মানে জিডিপি বাংলাদেশের যেভাবে করে বাড়ছিল ক্রমাগতভাবে, ফলে বাংলাদেশকে তখনকার প্রেক্ষাপটে আর কোনো গরিব দেশ বলা যায় না। আমেরিকা আর গরিব বলে গণ্য করছে না। ফলে এই যে কত পার্সেন্ট ট্যারিফ দিল কিংবা ধরেন আ আমেরিকা থেকে কোন পণ্য আমদানি করতে হবে, বোয়িং কিনতে হবে, সামরিক যন্ত্রপাতি কিনতে হবে। এগুলো বাংলাদেশকে তারা আর গরিব রাষ্ট্র বলে বিবেচনা করছে না বলেই আ আ মাইকেল রুবিন বললেন। সেই সঙ্গে তিনি জামাতে ইসলামী যে ক্ষমতায় আসার সব রকম প্রস্তুতি নিয়েছিল, সব রকম প্লান্টেড হয়েছিল আ জনগণের ভোটে নয়, আ আ একটা পরিকল্পিত ছকের মাধ্যমে সেটিও তিনি আজকে আবারও বললেন। সেই প্রকল্প তাদের বাস্তবায়িত হয়নি। ফলে এরকম একটি অবস্থায় বাংলাদেশ কি সিদ্ধান্ত নেয়, আ চায়নার সঙ্গে সম্পর্কটি তারা কিভাবে বহাল রাখে, আবার আমেরিকার সঙ্গে সম্পর্কটি কিভাবে করে উন্নয়ন করবে, সেটি একটু দেখার বিষয়ই থাকে। আপনারা জানেন যে সাবেক উপদেষ্টা বর্তমানে পররাষ্ট্রমন্ত্রী খলিলুর রহমান অনেকেই অভিযোগ করে থাকেন যে তিনি উম ভারত মানে আমেরিকার ব্লেসিং এ তিনি মন্ত্রিত্ব এখন পেয়েছেন। আগে পররাষ্ট্রমন্ত্রী ছিলেন। এখানে হয়তো তিনি একটা বড় ধরনের ভূমিকা রাখবেন। অ্যা এটি আমি নিজে থেকে বললাম, এটি মাইকেল রুবিন বলেননি। ফলে অনেকগুলো হিসাব আজকে আপনারা হয়তো মেলাতে পারবেন। আমি আশা করি কিছুটা হলেও মানে একটা সামগ্রিক চিত্র আমরা বুঝতে পারলাম যে বাংলাদেশের সামনে এখন করণীয় কি রয়েছে। যারা এতক্ষণ আমার সঙ্গে ছিলেন সবাই ভালো থাকুন।